New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment. Inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
It is the Practical Prayer Podcast on New Thought Media Network. I am Bill over here. There's Carol over there. And I'm very excited. I'm probably containing myself very nicely. But as we started rolling the intro, Carol was still either off in the green room or getting green or something like that. So, hello. Good to see you.
Hello. I can't wait to hear why you're excited.
Because you're here. Usually we have a few seconds to talk before we go on live. And, I've been having exercises in letting go lately. And like just knowing that everything that is unfolding in sweet perfection. And the exciting part was I found that when it was the top of the hour and it was time for me to play the intros, it's like, oh, if I have to do the show on my own, I really need to think of what I'm going to talk about.
Get out.
So that was exciting. I came up with something, but it was exciting.
Oh, did you? What did you come up with?
Oh, it's about principle.
How's my sound? Is it good?
Your sound is good. I think your sound is good. Yeah. So,
okay.
The principle part of it is that if this is actually a principle, that whole thing that we talk about is all based on one completely reliable creative law, then it has to work all the time. And not just, happy clappy times on a gorgeous spring day. It has to work when, I don't know, let's say people are being snatched off the streets of the United States and whisked away to foreign countries and jails, or, the stock market is tanking. Principle still needs to apply times like that as well, or times like this as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I've had so many thoughts about this for several weeks, but I wasn't sure where we were on stuff like this, So I just waited.
Okay. Well, what do you want to talk about that? Or you want to talk about something different today?
Actually, since you brought it up, I would really like to talk about it. I really would. And the reasons why is because this is probably the worst nightmare that some people have ever experienced. And people are extremely unhappy and confused and all of that. And if our spirituality means anything, then it has to mean something at a time like this.
Amen to that. And I'm going to change my previous answer. Your volume is a little bit high. So turn it down just a teeny bit.
Okay.
I think. It's always hard
to tell.
Better?
Is that better?
We'll go with that. Yes. Just
okay.
I know you leaned into the microphone and said, "Is that better?" So I don't know if all we need is you saying, "Is that better?" Then I don't know. Turn it back up just a little tiny bit.
Okay.
It's like we're doing the microphone volume hokey pokey over here.
How's that? Is that better?
Great. I'm going to go with that's great. Yep.
Okay.
We'll see what that means. So that's the thing about a principle is the rain falls on the just and the unjust, et cetera, et cetera. But let me first of all greet the folks who are joining us on New Thought Media Network. Hey folks, joining us on New Thought Media Network. This is the pre-show for the Practical Prayer Podcast. We're going to record an episode of the podcast, which is going to drop into podcast land next Wednesday morning at 4 a.m. Eastern Time. as though anybody pays attention to exactly when a podcast shows up. It's like, oh, I got a notification. There's another podcast. I haven't listened to the last 7, but might as well. Anyway, and we do the recording session here live on New Thought Media Network, so that a few of our dedicated folks, like my friend Lynn, can join in and watch the live recording, so she knows ahead of time what we're going to be talking about. And every once in a while, we talk about something that's particularly time sensitive, like if it's Memorial Day and we talk about Memorial Day, or today when we're talking about the country being in trouble, which my suspicion is we'll be able to continue talking about past next Wednesday, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So anyway, if you have a question or a comment or something that you would like to suggest to us, you can put them into the comments on your social media, and we will be able to respond to those live. Or if you're watching on the recording, you can go to the website, bethelight.com, like it says right down there, be-the-light.com. And there's a section on practical prayer and a little button where you can respond to the podcast and throw in your 2 cents, or whatever your 2 cents happens to be worth by the time you get to the button. I'm sorry. Too soon?
Oh, you're having a great day. This is good.
It's all good, right? Sometimes it's sometimes more apparent than other times. So you want to go ahead and start the episode?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. On your mark, get set podcast.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
We're going to talk today about principle. And this is really getting down to the fundamentals of the New Thought teaching and the foundational basis on which practical prayer works. And we're doing that because in the news, as of the date that we're recording this, the economy is in free fall and people are wringing their hands, and there's, as you might say, trouble afoot. That's what we say out in the world here. And what we get to do is talk about principle. So I'm going to shut up for a second, and then you phrase the question, because I listened to in the intro. You have some questions.
I don't really, you know what? It's a lot in this. There's a lot of moving parts. So let me say it this way. We're experiencing a really difficult time right now. And the word that comes up every time, it doesn't matter what newscast I'm looking at, I'm always tuning into what people are feeling. And it's fear. It's fear because we've lived our lives in such a way that we've not had to worry about any of this kind of thing because we have a constitution. And, we're finding out that the Constitution isn't exactly the Bible, but it's never been challenged in such a way.
Well, it depends on what church you grew up in, because there are some organizations that think that the Bible has some stuff wrong. But yeah, so maybe it is like the Bible.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much, because we weren't here before that. We were born into a time where, and this kind of stuff happens elsewhere in other countries.
Right.
And suddenly it's here, and it's so sudden. It's like, what's happening to us? And we were depending on this, and this. And there's fear, not just by what has happened, but every single day something is new.
Right.
And the statement that I made, and I wasn't sure if it was okay to make the statement, but I really mean this. If our spirituality is real and worth a dime, it has to be now. It can't be just something that makes us feel good when things are, normal and moderately. This is crisis time. And this is when it matters. What we believe matters. And
Yeah.
So
Okay. So a little bit of background. I spent some time in my youth as a Boy Scout, and the motto of the Boy Scouts is "Be prepared." And there's a way of looking at be prepared means that you live a righteous life and you don't have to think about anything else. Never need to buy insurance. Never need to learn to do first aid. Never need to learn how to do a water rescue or any of those other things that people would be prepared for, because everything just goes your way. And that's not the way the world works. Be prepared is not about inviting disaster. It's about being in a position where, regardless of what happens, we're going to be okay. And that's the principle. That's the principle. I was having a conversation about, finances and where you put, you got money invested in the stock market and the stock market starts to crash. What do? And I said, the time to start boarding up the windows for the hurricane is not while the eye of the hurricane is passing over you. Okay? Too late. The time to do that is in advance. It's a be prepared sort of thing. And by the way, I have never wanted to be in the middle of a hurricane. I've never wanted to be a homeowner with my home in the middle of a hurricane. And I did find myself one afternoon putting boards on the windows because I lived in South Florida and Hurricane Andrew was coming in, and we didn't know it was going to be coming through my neighborhood or 40 miles south, which is where it turned out to have come through. But I felt a lot better being prepared rather than planning on getting blown away to Kansas with Dorothy. Or whatever that story is. Yeah, so there's a lot of fear going on now. And it's uncertainty and fear. And, on the one hand, people say, well, the spirituality doesn't do any good because there's still a hurricane. It's like, you know what? There are hurricanes, and we live in a country where there are hurricanes. If you really want to avoid hurricanes, there are places where you can live that they're not going to bother you. That was one of the things that I noticed when I lived in South Florida as Hurricane Andrew was coming in. It's like, yeah, I live near the beach in the tropics. So if there's going to be a hurricane problem, it's probably going to be here.
yeah, I think being prepared is important. That's why we study, we come to our classes, we read, and we're doing all that. But where the rubber meets the road is how I respond to while I'm in the crisis. Right. What do I do? Because we know that in whatever side of the street you're on, whether it's traditional or what, sometimes you can't remember how to pray when the wolf is at the door. You can't figure it out, as good a student as you may have been. And I think that right now, to me, it's calling us to ourselves and saying, what do we believe in? And we articulate these things. Okay, it's time to live that. It's time to wear that. And this is it. There is no other moment. This is it. There's no warning. This is it. And that's what happens with life. We're used to death. We understand that. We feel grief.
We don't necessarily favor it, but yeah.
No, we don't. But, it comes in a lot of different forms. And sometimes it's a relief, to the person leaving or the people that are left behind. We are accustomed to that. We are not accustomed to being threatened, our well-being being threatened like this.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, and I heard a comment that I laughed so hard, but it was so true. And I've heard it before crisis time, and you'll recognize this. Ain't nobody coming to save you. Nobody is coming to help you. And when it's not crisis, you hear that, you say, yeah, you know what? That Jesus story, that's a bunch of, I drank that Kool-Aid too. And yeah, that's really right. But now you're in this moment and nobody's coming to save you. All you've got is you and what you believe. And what is that?
Right.
And, there's all kind of movements going on now. And my question to one particular movement is that, okay, so I hear the words, but what does it mean to live by those words in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Because the nice stories right now ain't getting it. No.
I hear you. And we'll start. Actually, the second thing we're going to get to is the principle, which is the core of what we're talking about today. And the piece that I want to start with is the practice. So there's a spiritual practice we've been talking about for a long time. It's practical prayer. It's about doing a meditative practice. It's about cultivating our awareness of our connection with the infinite. It is about working that spiritual muscle so that it is loosened up and it is strong. And the reason that we do that on bright, sunny, happy days is because it's really nice to have that to lean back on and not just get ourselves stuck into a foxhole prayer. Oh, please, God, make this stop. Mm-hmm. Please, God, if you do this for me now, then I'll do something else for you, as though God needs you to do something. Mm-hmm. So practice, practice, practice. The best time to start your spiritual practice is 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is that you're going to be doing, get started so that you are aware of our involvement with this co-creative universe, so that it's not just about panicking, saying, okay, now there's something that I don't think I can control, that my ego can't grab onto and force into the dimension that I want it to be in. So now I'm going to turn to the infinite. Having that relationship with the infinite, knowing that we can lean into that, is hugely important. Mm-hmm. It is hugely important to be able to do that.
The thing that I love about New Thought and practical prayer and this whole ideology that I'm wrapped up and tied up in now is that it's on the other side of the street. You're waiting for God to do something. On this side of the street, I'm saying, what do I know? What do I know about God? Okay, let's go. And let's go may mean let's let go. You know what I mean? It's either way, but it gives me something other than, it's more tangible, even though faith is not a tangible thing. But I think you understand what I mean. I'm in the mess now. Okay, mm-hmm. I'm in the mess, and nobody seems to have an answer, especially some people who have been talking a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
Now they're doing this because they can. That is not a good answer for me. That's not a good answer. We all know friends. We have friends that might have been deported or are afraid of that. Mm-hmm. Because they can is not an answer for me.
Right.
So, but on the side of the street that I embrace, I'm in partnership. You just said those words and it really, leaped. We understand what it means to be in partnership with Spirit, with God.
Right.
And it's like God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived. That's part of my definition. So I'm in partnership with that. Okay, I can do this because, I shouldn't have hung out in your classes.
You should or you should not have?
I shouldn't have, because when you tell me something, when I find out something, it's a wrap. So
this stuff is really simple. It's not necessarily easy to live, but it's simple to learn. So it's deceptive that way.
Well, you take your time with it. I mean, there were certain buzzwords that I have. Other people's not so much. Everybody's got their own. I heard you say infinite possibilities, and I'll never forget that moment. I said, he should have never told me that, because, and that's what I mean. Don't ever let me find out. He should have never told me that, because I have so many things in my mind. And you're telling me there's infinite possibilities. This little stuff in my mind means nothing. I'm going after this. You see what I mean?
Yeah. And there's no reason not to, because, and that's kind of the cool thing about it being partnered with an infinite power. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the divine. We're talking about the one creative power in the universe that creates everything. So it has created billions of galaxies. Okay? And billions of people just here on planet Earth over the course of millions of years. And so when you look at it from that perspective, when you look at it from the creative principle of always unfolding, how much of a difference does a change in the Dow Jones average mean to, let's say, the closest other galaxy to ours? Not so much. Not even so much in the next closest solar system. And the point is that the power we're partnered with is so big, so vast, so grand, so limitless, so beyond what we can imagine, that the best thing we can imagine and the worst thing that we can imagine are so much smaller than just rounding errors in the overall unfolding of the universe, that literally anything we can imagine is possible. Anything is possible. So my friend and colleague Robert D. McDonald has 4 questions. And I love his 4 questions because they cut right to the meat of the topic. And I think we might have gone over these before. The first question is, are you happy with the experience of life you're having now? Yes or no? It's a really simple question. So a lot of times people say, yeah, I'm happy. And you say, okay, you're done. Keep doing what you're doing. It's going just great. You can skip the other 3 questions. The second question starts getting into it. And you need to do the first question because a lot of times people come into prayer and they're praying for stuff they already have. They think they need to go into prayer and ask God to smile upon them for reasons that are indeterminate. And that first question is, are you happy with the experience you're having now? No, I'm not. Second question, what is the experience you'd like to be having instead? Not what do you want them to do, not what do you want the world to look like. What's the experience of it you want to be having? What's the experience you want to be having instead? Oh, well, now we go from pointing at the problem and describing it and listening to the people on the news explain just exactly how bad it is. Oh, look at the numbers. Look, see this chart? This chart makes it look worse than the chart we showed you yesterday.
Yeah.
News is the news because it's different. If you're happy with the experience you've been having, then you can continue doing that. If you're not, stop focusing on the stuff that you don't like. Stop focusing on the experience that you've been having and focus instead on the experience you want to be having instead. What's the experience you want to be having instead? Well, I want to be secure, and I want to be prosperous, and I want to be loved. And that tees up the third question, which I think is the brilliant one. Once you have it, how will you know you have it? Oh, damn. Here I was saying I want to be happy. I want to be loved. How will I know that I'm happy? Will I wake up every day with a spring in my step? Will I never be unhappy? Is that really what I want? Do I want to be confident that today is going to come out, in a way that's uplifting for me and the people around us? You really got to be specific. Once I have it, how will I know that I have it? You got to quantify it. I want to be prosperous. Well, what does that mean to you? Does that mean that you have $1 million in the bank? Does that mean that you have $1 million in your portfolio? Which, by the way, means something different this week than it did last week.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, because $1 million in the portfolio last week is $800,000 in the portfolio this week. Is it a dollar amount? Is it a feeling? Is it the confidence and the comfort of knowing that I have enough? So is it an intangible? Once I have it, how will I know that I have it? I want to be happy. What does that look like? For introverts, happiness is being alone on a mountaintop with plenty of food. And for an extrovert, that'd kill him. There's a guy I've been talking to from time to time who's such an extreme extrovert. He can't go for 15 seconds with another person around without having a conversation. He has to be engaged. He said that the pandemic lockdowns just about killed him. He kept on having to find ways to go someplace and do something and talk to people. Got a private airplane, and he got in the airplane and he flew places because he got to talk to the people on air traffic control. I mean, and for the introvert, that would be awful. So it's about once you have it, how will you know that you have it? And you started by talking about the situation that we're in is that the Constitution is something that we thought we could believe in.
1:26 p.m.
And even more importantly, people all over the world thought they could depend on the world order being what it was, and that's shifted. So the ground has slipped underneath everybody's feet, and it's like, whoa, now what? So there's a huge, huge, huge amount of uncertainty that's going on. And that's actually what people are afraid of. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what malevolent force or uncomfortable thing is going to happen and come along and need me to deal with it. And it's very uncomfortable, you know. And even back to being prepared, there's a lot of preparation to do. As my colleague Carol would say, that's a lot.
Well, yeah. I was listening to you very closely what you were saying, and one of the things I think about, I look at things in detail. We've been here before in different ways, and that's in that sense, it's a bit calming because I'm saying what I've told myself. I've been here before in different ways, but we've been here. I mean, the pandemic is not very much different, you know, in the detail of it. So the question that I have, and I keep pushing this question, what is mine to do in this situation? It might be nothing other than to get my head on straight and don't freak out about it.
Isn't that hard to do?
Well,
Yes, I'm doing my job. It looks like I'm doing nothing, but that's my job.
But think, you know, slow it down. We have been here before. And we've also known people. If we weren't born in a particular time when this kind of thing has been happening, we knew people close to us that have been through it. We know these stories. Okay, so now let's what's the next thing? What is it that is mine to do in this situation? I listen to the news enough to know what's going on. The details, you'll go crazy because, you know, it depends on what channel you listen to. But okay, if it turns out this way or if it turns out this way, and I have to look at my life right now and say, okay, what is mine to do the best of all possible circumstances or for the best outcome? What is mine to do? And that's really like, you know, what I think is Florence Scovel saying, what's the next divine right step? Those things mean a lot to me in terms of, because that's what I can do. I can't do anything about all the rest of this, but how am I going to navigate myself through this so that at the end I come out okay? It's like Jesus, when they were in the ship in that storm and the disciples were going nuts, putting the water over the, you know, you can imagine them grabbing buckets and one goes down and asks Jesus, you know, don't you care that we perish? And Jesus is down there resting. Okay, so he comes up and he does what he's going to do. And he says, oh, ye of little faith. I'm thinking to myself, I'm not of little faith. I have huge faith. Okay, so it was all nice that the sea got calm and everything. That's a nice miracle.
That's a nice miracle.
You know, I mean, really, that was big, but that wasn't the end of the story. And nobody wants to talk about the end of the story. When they went on shore, those guys got out and they were battered and bruised and wet and cold and hungry and all of that, but they made it. They made it. And I'm looking at the same way. If we figure out what is ours to do individually and collectively in community, whatever it is, what's the best thing to do to navigate through this storm? Because when we get finished, I mean, there's collateral damage. We see that already. But to come out with as much strength as possible to continue, because this is not the end. I just don't believe that.
Yeah, and so there's the question, is this the first time that awkward, uncomfortable, unfair things have happened to people in the world? And the answer, of course, is no.
Right.
It's just happening to more people all at once than it used to. And perhaps it's happening to different people than it used to. And that has our attention. And that is the opportunity to go back to principle. So let's take a break and we can continue talking about principle, because we've danced around a little bit, but we haven't really gotten to what the principle is. So
Okay.
Let's do that. Are you ready to get results? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. Are you ready to get results? RUR2GR. That's actually the abbreviation for the steps in a practical prayer. Recognition, unification, realization, gratitude, and release, with a couple of extra steps in there in case some doubt creeps in along the way. RUR2GR. This class is about the prayer technique that's common to all of the spiritual practices and religions in the most effective prayers that they have. And by effective, I mean that the prayer works. It actually creates a change in the experience of the person doing the prayer. It gets a result. We're going to begin with theory, and then we're going to take it into practice. By the end of the class, you will have your very own practical prayer that will help create transformation in your life.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
We're talking about woeful things happening in the world around us and being able to somehow find the experience that we want to be having instead and apply that universal spiritual principle that we keep on talking about. We should probably actually get to talking about it this time. So a principle, the difference between a principle and a belief is a principle is something that always applies. And, for example, gravity. Okay, gravity is going to work pretty much the same way for everybody. We're standing on the surface of planet Earth, and it's pulling down on everybody exactly the same way. And everybody can kind of agree, even though we've never seen gravity, we've seen the effects of gravity, and we kind of believe in it. Same thing with electricity. The only time that you see electricity is when there's a spark and it turns into light, or ionizing radiation, as they call it. And you can see the spark, but it's not the electricity you're seeing, it's the side effect of the electricity. But boy, oh boy, have I seen electricity go to work for me. Turning on the lights and making the refrigerator work and doing all those other things. People who are driving electric-powered cars, it's like they drive all around and it's just electricity. So, of course, electricity works, and that's a principle. Aerodynamics, about what keeps an airplane, which is much heavier than the air, but it's able to stay up in the air. And we have gotten to the point where we believe that works because we've seen it and experienced it often enough. And it's a principle because it is true whether you believe it or not. It is true whether it applies, whether you've ever experienced it. And even if you don't know that it's there, it's still there. So there's a law of flotation, which is about the displacement of the weight of the water with the weight of the ship, which is why steel-hulled ships can float. For the longest time, people thought that something needed to be made out of wood or something very light so that it would float. And then somebody discovered the principle. The principle wasn't new when they discovered it. The principle was always there. They just discovered it. There are new principles being discovered all the time. Back in the olden days when I was working in the technology business, we were talking about how impossible it would be to make computers more powerful or memory more dense than X, Y, or Z just because of the physics and how long it takes light or electromagnetism to get from one part of the memory core to another. And they figured out a way around that. And they didn't do it by changing the speed of light. They changed it by applying a principle that had always existed in a different way. So, yeah, the principle is there whether we are aware of it or not. Okay, so that's enough about principle. Now let's talk about the spiritual principle that I'm talking about, which is a little more applicable. And it gets back to the creation story. In the beginning, there was darkness and void in God. And yeah, I like to put the pause there in the middle of the sentence. Because most people think, in the beginning, there was darkness, void in God, period. Or there was darkness and void, period. And God said, let there be light. Well, if there's darkness and void, where did God come from? So I like to move the punctuation. In the beginning, there was darkness and void, and the only other thing there was God. Right? God and darkness and void. Okay. So because God, that had to come from someplace. Didn't show up in the beginning of the next sentence out of the void. God was always there.
Okay.
So nothing but God. There's only God. And God said, let there be light. And that was a powerful intention. And then there was light. And what created the light? That's the principle. The creative principle is that when impressed with a positive intention, a creative intention, there is a law, a creative law that responds to consciousness to create something. God said, let there be light, and there was light. And if you go a little further into Genesis, God said, let there be the firmament, and God said, let there be the creatures and all the rest of it. And the same creative law continued to respond. God said, let there be, and there was. Everything that exists is a result of that one creative principle being applied in a different way. Because you would think, light and planets is completely different, but they're not. It's the same process, it's the same principle. And that is the same creative process that's going on now. It wasn't, here's this creation story of a world that has nothing to do with us, and we came along later and we're living in a different world. No, this is our creation story. This is where we came from. This is the same creative principle that we're using now. That's the principle. When we set a conscious intention, preferably one that's positive, powerful, personal, and present tense, when we set a conscious intention for the experience that we are desiring, especially if we let go of our attachment to how it's going to look and how it's going to work, which is the importance of that second question. Once I have it, how will I know that I have it? Or, what's the experience I want to have instead? That's the second question. Not what do I want Susie to do when I ask her out. How do I want to feel when the prom comes along? And that same creative process is continuing to work. It's continuing to unfold. It is a principle. There's nothing that stands in the way of it. If we set an intention for something we want to have in our life and we don't get it, it's not because the principle isn't working. It's because we were claiming something that we don't believe we deserve. So the principle is working even though it is subtle in its application. Would I like the current financial crisis to end? Sure. Would I like the other things that I consider to be a crisis to clear up? Absolutely. Would I like to go back to things being the way they were, pick a year? No. I want this year, this moment, to be the best ever. As good as I could possibly have imagined, as good as anybody could possibly have imagined, and even better. And the creative principle is responding to that. Maybe some of those old things come back. Maybe some of the structures that we had gotten used to that are now in question are going to be revived and renewed and refreshed, and people are going to find them to be much more important than they did before. And maybe not. The principle is always working, so we get to work with the principle by claiming the good that we are seeking and then participating in whatever is ours to do. That's the be prepared part. And surrendering what's not. Because if I think it's going to happen because I'm going to go and use a wrench on the axle of the universe, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. There's a much greater power that's at work here. All right, that's a lot of words. I'm going to shut up for a second.
Well, in that second, let me ask this question, though. How do you determine what is the good? Because in some situations it was, okay, it's good. We got it. But I was particularly thinking about a broadcast that I did see yesterday. And it was really, I thought it was one-sided at one point. And then another person came on and said, but this is, and essentially he was saying, this is what's good for me, which was totally different than I expected and anybody else that was listening expected. But that was his good. So how do we determine the good for everybody concerned when the definition for good is different for each person?
That is an interesting question. You tell the story about the the people in our territory who have decided that they want to break off and be on their own, and that they deserve to do that, and that that's their right, and they're going to be free regardless of what it is that we say, no matter how much we've invested and how important that territory is to us. And it's a different story when you think that that's the story of the American Revolution. That's what the Americans said to the British. It's like, no, we want to be on our own now. Well, that was rather impolite as far as the British were concerned, but it's foundational as far as we're concerned. Mm-hmm. So has it worked out? I don't know. We're 250 years in. There's been some high points. There's been some good news in there. When we're looking at a situation and we are concerned about what we're not going to have if it doesn't go the way that we think it might be going, or that we wanted it to go, What we are talking about is fear. And that's what you started with at the very beginning of the podcast, is there's a lot of fear going on. And there is. Mm-hmm. And fear is that uncertainty, that lack of confidence that things are going to be safe or harmonious or reasonable or fair or good or adequate for us. And especially in, quote, trying times like these. By the way, every time something happens, these are trying times like these. It's been going on for centuries. It kicks up our fear. And faith is the opposite of that. Is it possible, with all these things going on in the world, that it's going to be okay? So what we want to do is turn from fear, which is that downward emotion that that sucks us under, to love, which is that divine creative power, that givingness that creates everything. In the beginning there was darkness and void, and God said, "Let there be light." That was a sharing of self. That is an act of love. I'm going to take myself and I'm going to share myself and bring it into this creation. I'm going to, this is me. This is mine. That's better than family. Okay? That's self. Mm-hmm. That's love. So the foundation of everything that exists is love. And when we focus ourselves on spiritual principle, what we're doing is we're turning our attention back to that divine love. To know that that one divine power and presence, that one creative force that has created everything, that has created each of us, is creating something new for us and as us and through us, that even if we hadn't figured it out ahead of time, it's possible for it to be good. It's possible to look back in the rearview mirror and say, "Oh, wow, that was actually pretty cool." Never would have guessed it's come together that way.
I trust in the idea of the good, that's the good for all concerned. Mm-hmm. And good will look different to everybody right now, and at some point I have every confidence in the good that's going to unfold. It's the fear and the damage that fear does in the meantime, that I'm thinking about. Yep. And, fear, and I'm not talking about just being upset and watching the news and I don't know what's going to happen with my Social Security. I'm talking about the fear that makes people take pills, and jump out the window.
Yep.
That's real serious.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that, back to what I said in the beginning, spirituality to me, this is a lovely thing. This is just, you have no idea. For those of us who have experienced religious trauma and other traumatic things in life, but religious trauma in particular, this is a breath of fresh air. It is wonderful. It's really wonderful. But then real life doesn't stop moving just because you found a wonderful thing. So,
yeah.
So this wonderful thing has to mean something to me. It must mean something to me, because I know what it was like on the other side when traumatic things did happen. And that's all I knew, to depend on. And it was not there. Ain't nobody come. No, nobody showed up. Mm-hmm. And so I learned from that. So now I'm on this side, and I'm imagining the host of people that are in transition, here early, maybe a little experience, in transition, saying, "Help." Mm-hmm. And I mean this, I hesitated to say this, but I mean this with absolute respect. Incense right now ain't gonna help us, and our crystals, that's the joy and the pleasure, but no, what it's got to be, you got to start right here. And everything is mind, right? Everything is that. You got to, in my view, Ernest Holmes is big on that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking,
absolutely.
Yeah, so all right, let's get busy thinking.
I was about to come out in defense of crystals and incense, but that's a whole different episode.
Yeah,
so
but
you are correct. It's about belief. It's about anchoring ourselves in principle.
Yeah, because we have to know how to get ourselves to the next moment and the next moment after that. And oh, by the way, in good shape when we get there. We don't want to be like having the residuals of taking pills and nervous and all of that. This is what we believe. There's good, there's in your the moment the God calls, there's magic loose. Okay, there's magic. I need to grab some of it right now. Okay, and I think staying with that and keeping that in front of people, they'll find their own strength and they'll find their own way, not just looking for somebody to say, this is how we do it. And I can find my own way because this is what's inside of me. And maybe it was always there, but I didn't know it before, but I know it now.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Finding that connection with the divine it's key. So, speaking of God calls, let's take another break, and we will conclude with a prayer. And this is going to seem like a big topic, but the prayer is pretty straightforward. It's about partnering with the divine to get that guidance about our next perfect steps.
Yeah.
Get inspiration in an instant. God calls are the gentle and uplifting moment of truth to help you remember that the bright light of God's love is shining right now as you.
It's your God Call with Reverend Bill.
Start your 2-week free trial today, and you'll get a phone call 4 times a week from Reverend Bill with an uplifting half-minute message filled with insight, wisdom, story, and fun.
Let your light shine.
You can answer the call to listen to it live or let it go to voicemail so you can hear it later. After the free trial, your subscription is just $5.95 a month. The details are at godcall.org. God calls are disruptive, intentionally.
Whenever you write something, put on a gold star.
They take you away from your routine to remind you about the truth of who you really are. They come at random times between 8:15 a.m. and 6 p.m., so you won't be expecting them. And somehow, the message is exactly what you need to hear at the time.
Magic is loose in the world.
It's a moment of motivation in the middle of your day. Find out more and start your 2-week free trial now at godcall.org.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. This conversation has been amazing.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And we're talking about principle, that one spiritual principle, which is the creative force behind everything. And it can seem very simplistic, except when you realize that everything in the universe has been created using the same creative principle. Then it makes it seem a little bit more complicated. Because by golly, there are still some things that I don't understand. And that's okay. They still work. I can engage with the world in a way that brings harmony and uplift into my life, even though there's a lot of it that's going on that I just am not aware of. Even looking out the window and seeing the trees budding and the grass growing. I don't know how to do that. I mean, I know how to plant grass seed, but the rest of it that's pretty mysterious about how that all works. And I don't need to know how it works in order to work it. And that's the key part. And that's what the prayer is going to be about today. It's going to be about setting the intention, opening the invitation, and inviting that infinite creative power, that creative principle that creates everything, to create newness in our lives. The important thing to do is to not claim something that we don't believe we deserve. To not claim something that we don't think can happen. Because that creative law is responding to our beliefs. As you believe, so it shall be done. That's actually true. That's how it works. So if I say something like I am prosperous and I believe that I'm never going to have enough money, then even though I said I'm prosperous, the law is being activated by my belief, and I wind up going ahead and struggling. Now, fortunately, I have not had to do that for a while, and we'll see what happens with stock markets and so forth. Maybe I don't have to do that again. That'll be great. Looking forward to it. But what we're going to do for this prayer is we are going to focus on our partnership with the divine, and we're going to invite guidance as to our next perfect steps, the steps for us to take. And at the same time, that will guide us away from the steps that are not necessary for us to take. And the whole prayer is about turning away from fear, which is the fear of the unknown, the unexpected, the unfamiliar, and turn ourselves to the awareness that there's only love, that divine love that has been unfolding and revealing and expressing itself since the very beginning of time is doing so now. So we know that there's one divine power and presence, one love, one source, one creative essence. We call it God or spirit or nature. It's the same one that's described in the Big Bang by the quantum physicists. It is that one divine essence that was there in the beginning, the one that, for whatever reason, began sharing itself, unfolding, evolving, creating everything that exists everywhere. That one divine power and presence has been unfolding, revealing, and expressing itself as all of its creation since that very moment of beginning. That infinite power and presence is right here and right now as me and as each one within the sound of my voice. We are all not connected to, but we are part of that one infinite creative power, that one divine intelligence, that one limitless love. It is the truth of what we are. We are not touching the divine. We are expressions of the divine. And knowing that, it's easy to see that the mind with which we think is our individualization of that one infinite mind. The creative power that we use is an element of that infinite creative power that creates everything. So all of the good, all of the intelligence, all of the wisdom that's available anywhere, that's available everywhere, is available to each of us. So what I'm claiming now is awareness, guidance, insight as to what our next perfect steps are. And it's different for each of us. I am claiming now awareness and guidance and clarity. This is not reading secret tea leaves. This is a clear, obvious sign. Divine, clear guidance for each one right now as to our next perfect steps. And we are not only informed of those next perfect steps, we are not only guided to those next perfect steps, we are inspired to take them. Knowing where the path to my good lies and standing still where I am doesn't do any good. We are each now stepping into that next experience of good and more good and more good unfolding. And it's not good the way that we describe it or define it or explain it. It is good as we feel it. It is love unfolding for each of us. And throughout the process, that experience of fear or hesitation that might have come up is transforming into love. As our awareness of our partnership with the infinite gets stronger and deeper and more resolute. Love is at hand. The guidance is underway. The perfect steps are happening. And I am grateful for it. Grateful for the good, grateful for the stories we get to tell, grateful for how rapid and delightful the transformation is. This is not something that necessarily has to take a long time or be painful. Not something that has to be worked on. This is transformational. And that same creative power that responded with light when the infinite said, "Let there be light," is responding now with the good that we are seeking. It's saying yes, and this is underway. And so I let it be. I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
Where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
And that is the conclusion of another episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast. We're in the post-show now on New Thought Media Network. Wow. There's a lot going on. It feels like pressure. Because it feels big, although there's no such thing.
It's big.
Okay. All right,
It's
we'll go
big.
with what you say.
And about the pressure, I'd have to think if it's another word, but I think if you use pressure, it's a good pressure. And because I'm in this space where people are looking to somebody for help. Now, we'll say, ain't nobody coming, nobody's going to save you. I get that.
No, who's going to save us is us.
Right, but
The Savior is
there's
within.
there's very many people who are saying, how is that? I can save myself, but how do I do it? And those in leadership are the ones that need to hear those voices and, understand the fear and say, listen, we say, we're walking each other home. Rumi uses that term. So along the way, those who are in leadership are sort of extending a hand, saying, okay, I'm walking you home, and this is what I can help you to remember. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yep,
I think
absolutely.
the responsibility is huge, and it's individual, of course, but there's so many who don't know how, and that's why they're afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. The best time to anchor a spiritual practice is 20 years ago. Like I said before, and the second best time is right now. Get to it. Get to it. And if the first prayer that you do is a foxhole prayer, oh, please God, save me. Keep working on the technique after the bullets stop and it turns out that you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Carol. As always, another episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast. We will come back and do this again next Monday, because I guess that's what we do, right?
That's what we do.
It's a Monday. It's a Practical Prayer Podcast episode. Thank you to the folks who are joining us on New Thought Media Network. If you are watching the recording, then you can go to the website, bethelight.com, be-the-light.com, and put in a request to comment, buy a copy of the book. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do over at that fabulous website. So go take a look at it. And thanks again. See ya.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.